find additional pieces of. So I want to thank you for coming out this afternoon, and wonderful pieces of Maryland folk art.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir. I see you've brought a nice little carriage clock.
Yes.
Tell us about the carriage clock.
Okay, it belonged to a member of my wife's family, and she was over in Europe and was going to come back on the Titanic and had this in her carry-on luggage, but she missed the Titanic. She got there late. The Titanic had already pulled away from the pier. So
that was a very fortunate circumstance to be late for that day.
Well, she got on the next ship she could, put a rusty nail in her foot.
She stepped on a rusty nail?
Stepped on a rusty nail.
On the second ship?
On the second ship.
After surviving the Titanic?
Well, she didn't get onto the Titanic, but yeah.
By missing it, she survived the Titanic.
And she died as a result of the infection.
Wow.
Either way, it was her fatal voyage.
That was a fatal voyage. Well, that's fate for you. I mean, her fate was out of her hands, apparently.
Oh, yes.
So what we have here is we have a brass carriage clock. They come in slightly different sizes, a little bit smaller, sometimes a little bit bigger. It was carried by a traveler in a carriage in order to keep time. And then later it was used on the mantle or in a boudoir or wherever one would need to keep time.
It still works, by the way.
Okay. So it's made out of brass and beveled clear glass. It has a white enamel face with a Roman numeral chapter ring, 2 hands, of course. It's late. Some of them were made fairly early, but this one's fairly late, probably turn of the century. It's probably English or continental, and doesn't have a lot of value, maybe about $800 at auction, but with the story that go along with it, that'll boost interest in the marketplace if it were offered at auction in the marketplace with that story. So it might boost it as much as 50%. So we're looking at a carriage clock that's probably worth between $800 and maybe $1,200. We appreciate you bringing this in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is something if your children want it, fine. If they don't, try to give it to them away.
Hi, can you tell me how you acquired this bowl?
It was my great aunt's mother's, and it's been passed down to me, and it's never been used.
Okay.
It was on her buffet.
Well, it's a Japanese Amari bowl. It's in fabulous condition. The colors are very bright. It has nice markings, very, very little wear in the middle. It's double-footed, which is very nice, and it dates probably 1850 to 1890, and the value is probably between $1,000 to $1,500.
We have a very interesting painting today with sort of a intimate scene from a circus, which is a bit unusual. Can you tell us something about this painting?
Well, this painting belonged to my father-in-law, and after he retired from the military, he decided to travel with the circus in the summertime as a clown. And he had a neighbor who was quite a collector of art, and when she was cleaning out her house, she let him pick a painting, and so he chose this one. And so I decided to see if I could find anything out about it. We were kind of lucky because the woman who was the collector had written the artist on the back and the year, and so it was fairly easy to look up a little bit about the painting.
And the artist's name is?
Is Victor Coleman Anderson, and he was an illustrator for, I think, Look magazine, and there were some other ones as well, but from the 1930s.
And Victor Anderson was, as you said, an illustrator. He's from New York, went to Pratt. America has a very rich tradition in some of our illustrators, and who also went to the fine art side, and of course the most famous being Norman Rockwell.
Oh, all right.
But here we have Victor Anderson, and he did a lot of horses.
Oh, all right.
Not all of them in the circus. And I'm not sure what his association is to the circus, but he did other scenes of a girl riding bareback on a horse,
All right.
Also other intimate sort of from the back scenes. And I noticed that written on the back, it has a title which says Ready for the Bareback Riders. And so it is sort of behind the scenes look. Some of his paintings have more of a sketchy quality as we're looking at sort of the breadth of what he did. And of course, as an illustrator, it's very precise, it's very realistic. And this painting is really for him one of the more finished pieces, a beautiful composition. It starts up with even just a little bit of the circus tent relief. You're seeing the backside of the clown, so he's not even distracting us from looking at these beautiful girls on these horses. And it's also framed under glass, which is interesting. That certainly has kept the painting in pristine condition. And he's used quite a bit of paint, so everything is fairly solid finish. He spent time on this piece. And based on some of the auction records, I know some of his larger pieces have perhaps gone for more, some of comparable sizes, but perhaps more sketch studies for less. But I would put an insurance value on this piece at about $10,000.
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
Thanks. That's great.
Thank you for bringing it in today. It's just an unusual painting.
Thank you. Well, I think this clown could be my father-in-law because that's the kind of clown he was, with the total white face, and he wore the white skull cap and the little funny hat. So thank you.
A good personal connection.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love how these Chesapeake treasures whisk us away to lost times and faraway lands, but some of the collections can't be brought to MPT, so we go off to see them. Follow us now on the yellow brick road to the most magic land of all, Oz, right here in Maryland.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz? I don't think there is a person who hasn't seen it. But you know, the movie was made from a book by a man named Frank Baum. And now I'd like you to meet someone who is really an authority on all the Oz books, Fred Trust. Fred, this is an amazing collection. How many Oz books did Baum write?
He started for the whole thing in 1899, so it's over the century ago and 40 years before the first movie was made. Frank Baum wrote 14 Oz books, and there's altogether 40 official Oz books written by other authors, recognized by the Oz community, that is considered very collectible.
And you have all of these books. In fact, you have more than one of every one of these books, don't you?
Yes, I have multiple copies of almost every title.
Let's talk a little bit about Frank Baum. He interests me. When did he start writing children's books?
Well, before, he had quite a few businesses that he failed, including the theater production. But in age 43, he actually wrote the Wizard of Oz books in 1899.
So he's a late bloomer as far as that is concerned.
Exactly.
How did you become interested in the Wizard of Oz and Frank Baum?
Well, Wizard of Oz is very popular not only in the United States, but all over the world. It's actually get translated to over 60 different languages. And you might be surprised that in Russia, for example, Wizard of Oz is more popular than in the United States.
Really?
Yeah. So I knew the story of the Wizard of Oz, but when my kids grow up, I want to find the books for them. And then I discovered that there's all those books available. And I started buying them for reading purposes for my kids, and then I decided to collect them.
Okay. Let's talk about collecting them. I mean, you have all these books, and there's some folks out there who probably have some Wizard of Oz books. How can you tell if it's valuable?
It is a very tricky question. Many people pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a $10 book. And in order to really know, there's a whole science behind identification of the Wizard of Oz books, if they're first edition or later printing. For example, these are the two first edition books, but This book, as a first print, because it's had certain mistakes, is 10 times more valuable than this book that is also first edition, but already mistakes been corrected. The same book that might be in poor condition might cost a couple $100, can go up to $100,000 if it's in great condition and signed by the author.
Really? So it's a whole big science out there.
It is. It is very, very complicated, particularly Oz book series.
Can you tell us about your own collection? Maybe some of the books that might be the most valuable that you own?
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, of course, is the most valuable book because everybody knows about it.
Mm-hmm. Is there one of the books that's more rare than all the rest?
I think the Lost Princess of Oz is one of the rarest copies out there because it was printed in 1917 during the World War I, and they only printed 12,300 copies. Mm-hmm. Besides Wizard of Oz books, there's other pieces of memorabilia that people collect. For example, games. My favorite one is Wogglebug game from 1906. There's only 6 of them in the world exist. There's memorabilia related to the Broadway musical from 1902. There's a original manuscript for some of the Oz books that I have. Original puppets, that one of a kind, and my favorite is Ozma of Oz.
Follow the yellow brick road.
And I love the memorabilia you've collected that has to do with the movie, particularly the replica of the red shoes.
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. You'll find he is a whiz of a whiz, if ever a whiz there was.
Your passion for the Oz books has never waned. You still are as involved as ever as a collector?
Oh, yes, because the aspects to find those books, that it's very rare. And they only publish few thousands of those books. To find them, it's like a treasure. And I love to show my collection to everyone. And I hope this gives people appreciation of L. Frank Baum, who started this all Oz book series.
I want to thank you for coming in. Could you tell us a little bit about the piece that you brought in for us to view today?
It's a brooch, and it was designed by Seaman Sheps, inherited from my aunt back in the late 70s.
This piece is a beautiful emerald with some diamonds on here, the old European cuts, and his signature is to put one stone